Hello, my name is Connor, and welcome to Locomotive History. Today, we're going to talk about a fictional railroad I built myself, called the Midwest and Southern Railroad, that operates in the Midwest of the United States and the Southern area. The railroad is formed from several companies that were bought, sold, or merged. Today, we're going to talk about three such railroads: the Grand Central Railroad, the McKinnon Mineral Railroad, and the Midwestern Railroad, all three of which played important roles in the forming of areas of the Midwest and Southern. The Grand Central Railroad originally was built to haul iron ore between the cities of Carson and the town of Henderson in the famous Anvil Mountain Valley of Oklahoma, which is fictional. The railroad was started in 1848, but in order to understand its history, we must go back to 1838, when iron ore was discovered near and on Anvil Mountain. Many flocked to the area and several mines opened up, including the Henderson Iron Mine, the Johnson Mine, and the McAllen Mine. It was shortly after that they discovered that though they could produce lots of iron ore, it was harder to bring it out, as there was not a reliable form of transport for the iron ore to the smelting areas of Carson City. In 1846, a group of men came forward and offered to build a railroad on behalf of the mines. This was quickly agreed upon, and plans were made for the railroad. By 1848, a route had been planned, and thus, on September 4th, 1848, construction began on the Grand Central Railroad. Construction progressed slowly, as they had to build from the city of Carson, where all the iron and steel was located. They continued building well into 1849 and 1850. In 1850, the GCR chief mechanical engineer, Mr. Malcolm Brenner, went to Britain in order to find two locomotives within the company's budget, as he had failed to find any in the United States. While there, he found two locomotives that would be able to handle the work. One being an 1815 Killingsworth locomotive for passenger work, and the second a two-cylinder 040 built in 1822 for the heavy freight work. In 1850, the men came upon a large gorge in a section of Anvil Valley. It was there they built the famous 1,000-foot-long Anvil Trestle, and by April 1851, the company had completed the 50 miles between the city of Carson and the town of Henderson. However, in May of 1851, a massive storm came through, which resulted in almost 20 miles of track being damaged or destroyed, resulting in the company having to rebuild it. By 1852, due to several people within the company itself embezzling funds and other issues outside, the company declared bankruptcy on July 4th, 1852, which was a unique coincidence considering it was July 4th. The company was sold on July 24th to the Henderson Iron Company, which in September of that year sold it, which in the railroad later became the Cypress and Central. In 1849, another company, this time located in the soon-to-be state of South Dakota, was formed after a large amount of coal was discovered in the early 1840s. Mines were established, and by 1847, a railway was proposed. This railway would become known as the McKinnon Mineral Railroad, and became one of the biggest suppliers of coal from the state of South Dakota. In 1849, the railroad started construction, and by 1853, it had its first locomotive, which hauled cargo, specifically coal, from the mines to the Missouri River, where a terminus had been built. In 1856, the line was extended south to Kotica, around 60 miles away. It was there that several more engines had finally arrived. They were custom-built Baldwin 420 locomotives. In 1858, a disaster happened when one of the brand new Baldwin 440 locomotives, number 16, suffered a brake failure while hauling a long passenger train and lost control on the famous and dreaded Mineral Climb, a very steep 1 in 39% grade between the Missouri River terminus and the main junction yard, where the line split apart. The locomotive crashed through the end of the barrier and plunged into the Missouri River, resulting in the death of 27 passengers and 2 board members. Sadly, the engineer was thrown from the cab and died, as well as the engineer. By 1860, the railroad was doing very well, and worked with the newer Midwestern Railroad in merging, creating the new McKinnon and Midwestern Railroad. The Midwestern Railroad was opened in 1851 and operated till 1860 when it merged with the McKinnon Mineral Railroad. The company, which at the time was one of the largest for the mines of Katka in the city of Pearson, hauled coal regularly. It was there that a very steep grade known as the Katka grade, a fearsome 1 in 30%, was made. By 1857, the railroad had extended to meet the McKinnon Mineral Railway at the McKinnon Missouri River terminus. It was there that a problem was found, as a large bridge had to be constructed. This bridge, later known as the Midwestern Rail Bridge, was one of the largest suspension bridges in the U.S. at the time, and was where one of the most famous grades in all of America was found, the Hellman grade, which was considered so steep that no single locomotive could theoretically haul even a single car up it, as the grade was near a 5% continuous for almost 10 miles. The company enjoyed very prosperous working, as in the city of Pearson they had their own locomotive works, which was opened in 1855, but had really been there since the very beginning. The first few locomotives that the Pearson Works built in 1852, when it really opened, were experimental 260 designs and could carry almost 1,000 tons of iron ore out of the mines. This was bigger and better than any other railroad locomotive that had ever been built. With the following year, in 1853, 5 new locomotives, known as the Pearson class, were built. These were large 210O locomotives and could handle anywhere from 2 to 5,000 tons. Unfortunately, the engines proved to be too powerful, resulting in them shearing or destroying their frames, thus resulting in a rebuild, making them 282s in 1858. The next 3 locomotives were 460s, designed to haul heavy and long lines of passenger cars, some weighing well over 500 tons. By the merger, unfortunately, only 2 of the locomotives actually remained, as locomotives 26 and 27 were damaged in an avalanche. Locomotive 27, which was easier to recover, was able to be hauled out, but unfortunately was later destroyed in an accident. In 1904, one of the locomotives, now owned by the Midwestern Central, broke the land steam speed record after a major rebuild at Pearson Works, which resulted in it hitting 94 miles an hour. The final locomotive built for the railroad was a custom engine and was considered the Monster, and thus named it, and became known as the Monster class. This was a 410-6, built in 1856 when the line between the McKinnon Mineral Railroad and the Midwesterner was proposed. The locomotive proved to be very powerful and unfortunately very heavy, as it failed to properly work on tracks without breaking them. It was later sold in 1864 to Union Pacific. But in 1996, the then owner of the railroad, the Midwest and Southern, found the locomotive and bought it, bringing the locomotive back and rebuilding it at the Pearson City Works. From there, the locomotive enjoyed working on the railroad. These three companies formed the backbone of what would become the famous Midwest and Southern Railroad's Southern and Northern divisions, and became one of the specialty rails used for one of the most famous railroads to this day.